For the latest on the Senate's efforts to get a coronavirus relief package passed, let's bring in Senator Pat Toomey, Republican of Pennsylvania. I was just actually looking, Senator, at what's going on in Pennsylvania, and there's some positive, just before we get to some of the other things you're going to talk about, Pennsylvania, there were some positive metrics just in terms of the coronavirus itself. Are there things being done in Pennsylvania different than the rest of the country, or are you just lucky at this point, Senator?
Well, only lucky relative to a place like New York, where we have obviously a full-blown disaster. New York City alone, I think, has a third of all the nation's cases, so we're not nearly in that predicament. But I have to tell you, the rate of growth in new diagnoses, new positive tests is still very, very high. So we're not at all out of the woods. In fact, it's possible that we're just, some period of time
doing more
behind
testing, yeah,
other places.
Yeah.
So the other thing that's happening in Pennsylvania, of course, is our economy is shut down. And I mean that in a very literal sense. It's hard to overstate this. But our governor issued an edict, and this has happened in many other states, as you know. As of 8 o'clock this morning, it is not legal for a business to be open for business, except for a handful of exceptions in critical industries like healthcare and food and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So that means it's not like a decline in our GDP that we're talking about. It's like going to zero. I mean, if all business is closed, if everyone is forbidden from going to work, which is the case right now as we speak in my state, you don't have an economy.
Right, Senator.
So
the futures have actually turned positive, as you can see in the bottom. We wish you the best down in Pennsylvania, but can you comment on what the Fed just on whether this is?
Yeah. So listen, the follow-up I would make on this, I'm very glad the Fed has done this. It is true that the Fed theoretically has an infinite balance sheet, but the Fed has constraints in how it can deploy that. The Fed is not allowed to lose money. And so that's why our legislation is so essential. What we do is we authorize a program where the Treasury can capitalize vehicles that can then go out and leverage up that capital, many multiples from the Fed, and use that to first and foremost stabilize these markets, get the corporate bond market, get the muni market functioning, because they're not functioning right now. But we envision something much broader than that as well, and it's permitted under our legislation to set up broad-based lending facilities available to any corporate borrower. And the point is to provide the liquidity to get through this terrible moment. We all hope this is brief. But if you are forbidden from opening your doors, if you cannot sell your products, you cannot stay alive. And if this goes on much longer and we don't do anything because our Democratic colleagues won't agree to pass a bill, then some of these companies are going to start dying, and they don't just come back with a flip of the switch.
Let me ask you quickly, Senator. I just heard you say the Democrats. I mean, I see the way the media portrays what happened last night. They called it just overall chaos in Washington. I had a different watching the Democrats vote no, just sort of down party lines after Schumer and others. We're talking about the bipartisanship as late as Saturday, weren't they? Can you tell me exactly what happened? I mean, you wouldn't just assume that that's political, that they did that to score political points.
It's hard to come to another conclusion, Joe. Just look at what happened. I've heard this rhetoric that, well, there's nothing for workers in this. Nothing for workers. There's $250 billion directly for workers. We bump up unemployment benefits by $600 a week so that in many states, someone who's unemployed would have 100% of their pay replaced. We expand eligibility to include people like the gig workers and self-employed people, all under unemployment. You know whose ideas those were? Largely Ron Wyden, the Democrat leader of the Senate Finance Committee, and we said, you know what, good ideas, we'll do it. And we negotiated with him these provisions. They're all in the bill. And then in addition to that, we said, you know what, that money might not get there very quickly, so let's send direct checks. And that's $1,200 per person. A married couple, $2,400. If you've got two kids, it's $500 a kid. $3,400, and all you need to do to qualify is have had income last year, and then we phase it out for higher income people. So, and then for small business, this bill has the government paying the payroll for small business. Literally, you get a loan if you're a small business, and as long as you keep your workforce on the payroll, the loan will be forgiven, that portion that you use to pay for payroll. My goodness, nothing for workers? This is unbelievable. And then the big fund that some are yeah.
Senator, there's no question that the clock is ticking and we need to get a deal.
Right.
Clearly, one of the issues that people are concerned about is the disclosure issue, which it gives the Treasury remarkable discretion, but not only remarkable discretion in terms of how that money goes out the door, but effectively keeps it in secret for a period of time. Can you speak to that specific issue?
Yeah, look, when we were negotiating the structure of this, it would have been nice for someone to said raise this concern. And here's what we did in working with our Democratic colleagues until the leader came along and upended it. We said we need two categories, right? This big fund that I'm describing that the Treasury would do jointly with the Fed, that's going to be open to virtually all comers, right? You'll have various categories. You'll specify the terms under which a company can meet the criteria, and then they get to borrow the money. That's going to be disclosed. There's going to be public information on that. There's another category, and that's a much smaller category, right? The small category is $75 billion. The big fund, the big leveraged fund, is $425 billion. $75 billion is meant for companies that a situation is so distressed that they don't qualify for the large broad-based lending program, because that is meant to be liquidity for fundamentally solvent companies. If you're in more trouble than that, and you're really critical to the American economy or our national security, we've broken that out. And look, we've been very clear. The legislation says $50 billion of that is for passenger airlines. I don't think there's a lot of mystery about who that is. And then there's $8 billion, and it's specified cargo airline. Not a lot of mystery about that. And so then that leaves you with $17 billion for defense critical industries. And that's a language that we discussed with our colleagues, because we don't know exactly a month from now a company that might be absolutely critical to our national security that might not be able to qualify for the broad-based funding because of their creditworthiness might be too much in doubt. So, yeah, there's a little bit of flexibility there. If somebody has an idea about how that gets disclosed and the timing of disclosure, that's easy to work out. It would have been nice to have heard this during the discussions as we were putting this together.
All right.
That's really the concern.
All right, we appreciate that. Thank you.